A tight game came down to the wire between the Seattle Seahawks and Tennessee Titans in this second preseason game of the year. And the Seattle Seahawks fell just short, losing out on a final field goal hit by the Titans as they were able to nudge Seattle out 16-15 in a game that could probably be best characterized as a mixed bag and a little bit sloppy on both ends from both teams, both sides of the ball. You start off offensively in this game, and again, Sam Howell was getting the start, so all eyes on him as a guy that not only a guy that could be a serviceable backup for Geno if he happens to go down, but for a guy who maybe potentially could be that quarterback of the future for your Seattle Seahawks. And he came out in his first 2 drives out the gate and did not look good. 2 quick 3-and-outs, and you got to see the worst of Sam Howell when he's on the bad side of things. Indecisiveness, not seeing things very clearly in front of him, not really on it in what he is feeling around him as far as the pressure goes, especially when that pressure is breathing down his neck, needing that internal clock to sometimes speed up in the pocket. Those type of things were there on those first 2 drives, but then it quickly got corrected onto the 3rd drive. And Sam really found his footing for 3 straight drives, taking Seattle down and getting scores on all 3 of those drives, including a touchdown throw on a 9 route that was just majestic. Layered the throw in perfectly over the top. So a great throw there and some fantastic drives from Howell where he started to show you some of the good side of what he can bring when those things are locked in, when the decision-making is locked in, when he's actually feeling the pressure and reacting to it in the pocket, when he's going through his progressions. He can tap in and be a really pretty good quarterback potentially if he can correct those things. And they are correctable, I do believe. But like we see through this preseason, he's still finding his way through that. You'll see some of it where he looks like he's not close to being right there and understanding it and it's not getting it. And other times where it feels like, man, the light bulb's starting to come on here and he's really, really getting a firm feel for it. The final drive where he had 38 seconds to start out from and you got 3 timeouts, 38 seconds, get him into field goal range. And he was able to competently put that and string that drive together with some smart decision making, including little things. Like when you drop back to pass in those situations, the defense is going to play to depth and they're going to play to the sidelines. So they're going to give you a lot of the middle and the open part of the field to throw to. And he was able to hit a couple of throws going up the field on those very kind of throws. Again, coming back to process, again, coming back to him using his noggin as a quarterback, not simply playing from within just what his physical skill set is telling him what to do instinctually, but actually processing and playing the position as you want and being a thinker as much as a doer on that side. We got back into the second half offensively, and PJ Walker pretty much came off the rails right from the jump. He was nowhere near accurate, didn't seem to know what he wanted to do from a decision-making standpoint, was not much, a little bit like the early part of Howell there, doing a good job of feeling the pressure around him. A little bit wild to watch Walker, a guy that if you call upon him to come out there and play for you as a 3rd stringer, if you do find yourself in that bad of a moment, you need him to be able to lean on his leg and lean on his ability to scramble and get out in space at times to get some 3rd down conversions in that way. He seemed to be set up in that way that we sometimes see these scramblers get locked into where I'm going to prove everybody that I'm a quarterback. I'm going to prove everybody that I can be a passer. And there were times in this game I thought he could have stood to have to utilize his legs. It's not a big deal. This is a 3rd quarterback on your roster. You'd hope you'd never have to be to a point of calling upon that guy. It still was not great to see him so out of sorts at times in this offense without much of a plan of attack of what he was even trying to do. From the run game standpoint of it, to start things off, Kenny McIntosh was just great. We were really hoping he could come back this year after losing all of last year to an injury that he suffered in the final scrimmage game, the inter-squad scrimmage game between the Seahawks out there at Lumen Field. Cost him all of last year. He's come back this year. Many are hopeful. Many are thinking that we got this guy as a 7th round steal in last year's draft. And he showed you a little bit why that is kind of the case by a lot of people and how they view him here. He had 2 catches for 17 yards out of the backfield, and then he had 8 carries for 46 yards running the ball. Showed you again what he can bring to the table on that, where he runs really well behind his pads. He's got some burst. If he doesn't have some speed, he's got some burst. So maybe he's not going to house you 50-yard runs, but he can get up to that top end speed as quick as anybody. And he can get you those 7, 8, 9-yard runs and get those kind of runs consistently while running hard at the same time and giving you a little bit of shiftiness in addition to that. So he played really well, I thought. And while you didn't have much from the rest of the running backs behind him, it wasn't really their fault. It was more because you weren't opening up many holes as far as the offensive line goes. The Seahawks came out in this game with their offensive line having really backups all across the board from what your pure starting unit is probably going to be when we actually get to game time. Maybe perhaps Bradford will be your starting right guard when we get to game 1, but there's a good chance all 5 of those guys could be moved out. And when you do look at the offensive inconsistency in this game, or through a little bit of the early part of preseason, looking at that line and where it's been and how Seattle's kind of protecting some of their guys that they want right and ready to roll come game one, Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas, Noah Fant. This has pushed other guys out there. This has pushed McClendon Curtis from guard out to right tackle. That's not his natural position. So when he gets overwhelmed out there, it's not a surprise. It's not a big deal. And it's not something that's a harbinger for when we get to the regular season. But the other backs just didn't have any room to work with when they did come out there. McIntosh didn't have a ton of room, but he made the most of what he had. And he had a couple of nice holes there off the left side, especially where I thought he made some nice runs on his end of it. But there just wasn't anything from the line as far as any holes then going through the rest of the game for the most part. Wide receiver wise, they continue to do their part, do their job at every turn. You don't see drops from this unit. You see them catching the ball when they get the opportunity to do so. There were times in this game, even with both the quarterbacks and Howell and Walker, where there's throws that the receivers just don't have any chance to do anything with. But if it's near them, if they're able to make the catch, you don't really see any drops outside of Brady Russell's kind of, I don't know what movie was doing there. It was like a Harlem Globetrotter move, where they do the basketball around their arms like that. He sort of caught it like that and spun out the other side of his hand, and kind of a bad drop there. But he made a couple of other nice catches, and the other guys caught the balls that were thrown to him. You feel for the back end roster receivers here: White, Aesop, Winston Jr. I don't know if these guys really have any possibility or any way to make this roster because your wide receiver depth chart is so stacked. But these guys, much like with Winston last year in preseason, do everything that you give them to do to take that opportunity and take that chance. You throw them the ball, they make the catch. Aesop Winston took the top of the defense off on that 9 route. He also had 3 catches for 47 yards in this game. So Seahawks receiving crew continues to look strong, both at the top end, both in the middle, and then also on the back side of it. Defensively in this game, it was a little bit like the offense. The overall defensive performance was good, solid. But it was a little bit of a mixed bag in addition to that. They definitely did start out, I think, really strong in this game. Showed you a lot of what you kind of saw last week, where they were able, for most part, to swallow up the ground game of the offense, and then they were able to really squeeze down on the routes on the outside. Again, it was, if you look from the start to finish on this game, more of the vanilla fronts up front. I don't know if McDonald just really wants to hide everything off as much as he can to get to the regular season. But when you do get to the regular season, you are going to see more stack fronts. You are going to see more blitzing. And it was odd in this game because you ran about 3-4 blitzes to my count through the first about 3.5 quarters or so. And every time you ran it, you sped up the quarterback's clock. You made that offense uncomfortable. You made their pass protection start to leak a little bit, but you weren't going to it a lot. You weren't going to it anywhere near the neighborhood of what I think you will go to it when we get to the regular season. This is something I'm anticipating a bit, but it's also a little bit of an explanation for why you saw in this team at times during this game in their 4-man fronts, dropping to zone depth, having some of those bigger holes within the zone to then go and attack. And when they would blitz, it would be kind of sometimes those simplistic blitzes we've seen in recent years' history, where you have the 4-man fronts and then you bring the one extra rusher. Ooh. And that one, then you've got 5-on-5, because then you end up with 5 offensive linemen, usually then on 5 guys trying to get to the quarterback. And a lot of times they still have the running back in play to help out if there is anybody able to kind of get past and chip up on. And so it's not a real effective blitzing style, those 5-man fronts. But they did keep kind of going to that when they were blitzing a little later on in the game. It wasn't terribly effective. And Mason Rudolph at the quarterback position, much like he did last year against us with the Steelers, where he was just dealing dimes all over the field. He wasn't necessarily dealing dimes, but he was just on every little detail with his throws of getting the ball out of his hand, getting it out quick, throwing with anticipation, doing what you would hope kind of a vet quarterback would do. I think Blake Wills played pretty solidly in his own right, but Mason Rudolph was very impressive in his decision-making and getting the ball out of his hands, standing tall against the pressure. And the Seahawks defense, I think, did a reasonably good job of generating pressure with that front four that you were mainly relying upon to get the job done. Derrick Hall continued to build upon a strong initial preseason performance against the Chargers, garnering him a sack, getting a couple of tackles, didn't have a lengthy amount of duty out on the football field today, but he made the most with it for the most part. He had one little error in the run game where he opened up for a little bit of an early run the Titans were able to get, but aside from that, he was really, really good from his standpoint. Darrell Taylor got some run in this game, and Darrell Taylor as a pass rusher early on impressed me. He came out over a couple play sequence and he came out and did a spin move. Then he came back on the next play, did a bull rush and got legitimate push on the bull rush where perhaps the lineman's expecting a little bit more of a finesse. Is he going to try to push the outside? Am I getting another of that spin move inside? Hits him with the bull rush, gets him backing up. Then he comes back another couple plays later and does the ghost move that he's got where you dip under the hands of the tackle as they're expecting to make contact. Got some pressure around that side of it. So he does show you in those moments, hey, I can supply some pass rush as just a pass rusher only kind of role that I'm going to hopefully fit into on this team. He also showed you on the other side of it when you had him try to hold the line off the edge in the ground game and remain firm over there, that he can't really do that. The hole got opened up. It was a big run early on in the game, and that's just not going to be in his game. But can he be a good pass rusher for us? Can he be a rotational fourth man in this edge group for the Seahawks? Because it may not seem like a very important position. It is important. You're going to go to all four of these guys throughout the course of the year, and having a guy like Taylor with that second round talent that still does exist, at least in the pass rushing part of his game, tapping into that could be very helpful for the Seahawks if he can bring that element of it. Mike Morris played a lot of this game, got a lot of run, and he got himself a sack. He showed you in this game how he brings you that true inside-outside presence. He can operate off the edge as an early rundown defender, set a hard edge, be a handful for any tackle in the sport. And then you can kick him inside against guards as a pass rusher, and then he's a problem inside. And he showed it on the sack where he's getting up under the pads, using those long arms, using some of his strength up against that guard, but then he's just got those long arms. He's 6'6", got the 34-inch long arms, and the quarterback's going past him, and he can just stick out that big, long meat hook, catch the quarterback, and bring him down for the sack. And that's just a little bit of what you kind of get as a benefit when you're that big and that long, and he's that able to kind of disengage and then pull off on it. So a nice little play on his part. He played a really solid game, and he's in a dogfight right now with Myles Adams, who also played really solid. Myles doesn't give you as much inside-outside stuff, but he's had, I think, a pretty solid preseason in addition to this, and they may be battling it out right now for that kind of last roster spot, so to speak. Linebackers played another really good game out there. Guy standing at the head of the stack, and this was the guy who was your highest graded defender last week by PFF, was Tyrice Knight. He's probably going to be your highest rated defender again in this game. He led the way in tackles. He had a tackle for loss. He could have been accredited for 2 or 3 other tackle for loss plays. It looked like he had right on the line, but he was solid. He had a nice little hit in there. He again shows that he's both seemingly a guy, at least with some upside, who can be a good run defender and good in coverage, that he's not sort of your just got that one skill I can lean upon. The other side I got to kind of get by on. He's actually well-rounded as a player based on what we've seen from him through just the first 2 games. But this is that developmental guy that we're hoping long-term can be that eventual starter at one of the inside linebacker positions. And to potentially get that in the 4th round for what he's shown so far is very, very, very encouraging. John Radigan was out there. I thought he continued to play solidly in this preseason. Patrick O'Connell out there getting it done on his side of it as well, back in as your sort of 3rd inside linebacker on the inside. So all of them kind of held the line, did their job for the most part. Secondary was a little bit more of a mixed bag in this game. 222 yards passing for the Tennessee Titans in this one. It wasn't as much as that you were getting hit with big shot plays or chunk plays, but there was a lot of loose zones, guys not really as tight in coverage. And it was disconcerting, of course, because you're rushing 4 and then you're dropping 7 into coverage. You're wanting to see those windows squeezed down. And we saw this last week in the Chargers game. We did not see that as much this week. Big part of this is having 3rd and 4th stringers out there on the board for so very long in this game like you did. And a big reason why that was the case is you were practicing all week against the Titans in padded practices. You kind of wore out the 1st and 2nd stringers. And so you had to go to the 3rd and 4th string guys in order to let them sort of ride this out a little bit longer on their end of it. And you didn't play as well because of that probably. You weren't as solidly put in place to play well because you were going to the depth of your depth chart at that point. Other than that, defensively, there wasn't a lot notable to me out in the secondary. You got Okada got a pick on a tip, which was a nice play on his part. He was lauded by Mike McDonald for having played some pretty good play. Marquise Blair got a lot of tackles in this game, had a tackle for a loss, getting the backfield late when you were really trying to keep them back, which was good to see, but didn't do anything real notable necessarily in coverage. I think DJ James struggled in this game in coverage quite a bit. He got picked on just a little bit. His buddy from Auburn, Pritchett, was just a little bit better in this game in coverage. He was a little bit tighter out there in coverage, but there wasn't anything, I think, super notable about what you're doing out there in the secondary in this game. And again, keeping everything, I believe, pretty darn vanilla when it's all said and done. To the special teams side of it, not a ton going on there on that angle of things. You have one notable part that's going to stand out from a lot of people here, which is going to be that Jason Meyers missed another extra point. He missed an extra point last week. He came back in this game, made 3 field goals, looked good on those 3 field goals. All of them had pretty good depth to them, so they weren't easy kicks, but he missed that extra point, and it comes back and bites you in the butt in this game as you lose 15-16, kind of on the back of that extra point. Now, this is a preseason game. This game doesn't matter at all in the grand scale of things. But we are all just a little bit worried by Jason Meyers. He is one of the highest paid kickers in this sport. There's an expectation here that we should be getting the returns for that highest paid kicker in the sport. But when you do look at his track record, it is up, it is down, it is up, it is down, and you can time it like you could time it on a stopwatch. And he's due for an up year. He's due for a good year. And those three made field goals or more, that being what we're going to be hoping to come to expect to see this season. But the missed extra point this week, the missed extra point last week, it does not sit well with, I know, a lot of Seahawks fans in my chat who definitely have a lot of consternation over Meyers and how much we are paying him. And hopefully he can eventually kind of get this turned around right, because we probably are going to need his leg. We are going to need this special teams unit to be great this season. I think Laviska is going to do his end of the bargain. Dixon showed you again today with his 51.2 average per kick with his 2 kicks inside the 20. We talked about it last week. The guy's phenomenal. He's going to hold up on his end of the bargain. Laviska Shenault in the return game and what he can bring, he's going to hold up his end of the bargain. But can Jason Meyers, that will be the big key to the special teams unit, not merely being good, but being one of the best special teams units in all of football. It's never fun to lose by 1 point, but there is so much more to be encouraged by than discouraged by through these preseason period with your Seattle Seahawks. The youngest head coach in the NFL, Mike McDonald, has seemingly acclimated to becoming a head coach with ease. We've seen no real bumps in the road. He doesn't seem to be out of sorts in this position, but taking on to it very naturally. Both systems seem to be onboarding at a fairly fast process on both sides of the ball. Again, much more to feel good about than to feel bad about in regards to both of those two things. And I can say I'm getting more and more excited the more I get to see this team for the start of this year and for the potentiality of this team for the 2024 year. I've called it the year of the great variance. New coach, a legend leaving, new systems to onboard. History tells us that tends to be one where you're not going to get a lot of wins in the first year, but there is so much talent on this team. They are so young. It could develop just so fast, and Mike McDonald might just be that good. It'll be the fun part to watch of this 2024 season is just what this team takes as far as their final form goes. But the potential is there. They could be good, and they're showing you the glimpses of that even in a 1-point loss like today. My name is Brandon King. This is the Hawks Nest. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. But beyond all that, don't you ever forget, go Hawks.